This week in the chamber, we're talking about some history, specifically everyone's favorite seafaring rogues, pirates, on this episode of Fandom Roulette. Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. My name is Joe.
And I'm Cody.
Alright, so welcome back to Fandom Roulette. Cody, what nerdy stuff have you been up to lately?
Lately, I've actually been watching Mr. Robot.
Ooh.
And that's been kind of this weird, eye-opening experience where I can no longer trust the government and capitalism as a whole, but...
That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty good, though.
Wow, that's surprisingly extant to the conversation we're going to be having today. I watched a couple of episodes of Mr. Robot, and I was going through some stuff at the moment, and I had to stop because I watched 2 episodes, and boy, did it take me to a dark place. So I want to watch it again at some point, but that might take a little bit of time for me to kind of ease back into that one.
Yeah, you got to take breaks. That one's pretty rough.
Well, it's one of my friend's favorite shows, and he is like desperate for me to watch it so he can talk to me about it. But I've explained to him that it's probably not going to be like a jolly romp through the media. So yeah, and let's see. For me, what other stuff I've been up to? I know I mentioned this in an earlier episode, but I finished up all of those Star Wars comics that I was talking about, and we definitely have to do an episode about them because they were goddamn amazing. It was some of the best Star Wars stuff I've read and or seen. This is coming from a person who rather enjoyed The Force Awakens. I would consider it one of my favorite. I would actually put it up in there in one of my favorite movies. I really loved it a lot, which I know is a controversial opinion.
Is it?
I guess. I don't know. There's some people out there who aren't super fond of that one. I loved it. I did everything I wanted it to do. It was fun and it was charming. But yeah, I think one of the most impressive things about these Star Wars comics is that as I'm reading through the original cast stuff, I'm actually able to read it in the characters' voices. And I feel like that was, I don't know if it was necessarily a challenging thing, but they do it so well that it's I could just imagine these actors saying those lines and having it work really well as a movie. It was so much fun to read. They did a lot of stuff that is just so cool and so fun. One tiny little moment that I will bring up, there's an amazing part in the third trade where Luke and Han are doing some smuggling, and they're actually smuggling Nerfs. So that means that Han Solo is canonically a Nerf herder. So remember that fun little line where he's like, "Who you calling Scruffy?" Yeah, he's actually a Nerf herder in one of the comics, and it was the most amazing thing.
That's fantastic.
I was so excited because it's a fun little offline, and the fact that they were just threw in, it's not even a giant point or anything, they just kind of threw it in as a fun little reference, and yeah, it was nice. It felt fan servicey, but in a nice way.
Nice.
So yeah, I mentioned when you were talking about how you can no longer trust the government or capitalism that it's surprisingly relevant to our topic of conversation. We're doing a history episode this week, which is kind of my sort of area of expertise, and I decided that I was going to go for an underhand softball pitch home run swing because we're talking about pirates, which is something that I know quite a lot about. So if you guys remember, if you listened to our pilot episode, I actually did a rather large paper and research about pirates and piracy and things like that. So some of the stuff I'm going to be talking about this week, and this is all stuff that we can deep dive into at some point in the future if people are interested in me talking a little bit more about it, or we can always bring it up in if we change up the format or anything like that. A couple of things I would like to talk about are mythology and kind of how we got there, why a person would choose to become a pirate.
Because you want to be a badass.
Yeah, because you want to be a badass. That's sure. That's one reason. And then a little bit about pirate society. I didn't necessarily want to... I mean, I'll be bringing up, actual pirates, but I didn't want to get too deep into any, one pirate story because they're all varied to the point where they could all kind of be their own episode on their own. So I was kind of considering this to be, an overview of pirates and piracy and things like that. So, all right, Cody, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to think for a second. I want you to name for me 5 pirates.
Real ones?
I just named the first 5 that come off the dome.
Luffy, Blackbeard, Zoro or Zolo, depending on how you watch One Piece.
Sure.
God. I mean, I could just list off all the One Piece characters that I know, and that's about as far as I can get with pirates.
Well, you're missing kind of a big one.
Oh, like Captain Hook.
Captain Hook, sure. And then think Keith Richards, but a pirate.
Man, now
a lot of people would go with Jack Sparrow.
Oh,
they would throw that one out there, right?
Other
ones that people would. Yeah, I know he's on his 5th movie. His time has come and gone. Another one that a lot of people like to bring up, and you didn't, but that's cool. Is
wow. Call me out right here.
Yeah, of course I am. It's Long John Silver, who is of course the main antagonist of Treasure Island, but. Of those 5 pirates that you named, one of them is accurate. Or is it rather a historic person. And I'm not saying this to put you on blast anything. Because
I'm terrible with history. I'm noted for not doing well in history classes.
That's cool. Hey, that's why I'm here. I try to find the fun in history, you know. But I feel like this is true if you went up to anyone on the street, you know. If you asked them to name just the first 5 pirates that come to your head, chances are, if they name any ones that are historical figures, Blackbeard would probably be number 1. I feel that your more pirate-loving individual might throw out Anne Bonny or Mary Read, and then you might find the occasional person who could throw out another name, like Black Bart Roberts or Calico Jack or people like that. But a lot of our knowledge, or rather our ideas of pirates, come from pop culture, which is perfectly fine, I guess, to an extent. I want to do another little fun activity, if you will allow me.
I will allow it.
Name a couple of things you think of when you think of pirates.
Sailing the 7 seas.
Cool.
Just looting other boats for their gold and doubloons.
Sure, that's fun.
And lots of rum.
Lots of rum. All right. So here's the thing, Cody.
Did I hit a nail on the head with the wrong one?
You actually hit a nail on the head on most of them.
Yes.
But I know a lot of things that people like to think of too. Of course, X marks the spot is always a popular one.
It's actually funny. We in a D&D campaign of mine, it is canon pirate lore that if you have to hide something, you got to put a big red X over it.
Of course, I mean that's what you put on the big treasure map. We have treasure islands.
Yeah.
We have peg legs and parrots and
eye patches
and big stupid cutlasses. Cutlasses are pretty cool actually, and all of these things. The skull and crossbones, which is called the Jolly Roger, and yo ho ho and a bottle of rum. And for a lot of these things, they're accurate enough.
Well, yeah.
But there is a lot of lore that has kind of been built around pirates. So I'm just going to knock some things down right off the bat.
Just going to drop some knowledge.
Buried treasure really wasn't a thing. I'll explain why.
You know, I always, even as a kid, I always kind of thought that was a little weird. Like, how do you remember, or what would happen if, you put it somewhere and you can't remember where it was, or erosion? Once I found out about that, it was like, sure. Now what the hell are you going to do with treasure?
Things like that. And I guess sort of the big thing behind why they wouldn't really be burying treasure either is that most times you weren't just getting big crates of gold, you were stealing goods. So you're stealing big things of indigo or sugarcane or raw goods that if you were to bury them underground, you weren't going to be getting the money because you want to sell those for the stuff that you need.
Right.
Parrots didn't tend to be as much of a thing either, just because parrots were loud and obnoxious, and you had to feed them, which meant that you were kind of taking away food from your men, which probably wouldn't have been all that popular. And walking the plank, I think there's at least one example of a captain making their crew walk the plank. But for the most part, there were lots of other fun tortures that you could be sort of succumb to as a pirate. One of the ones I'll drop right now is something called pickling, which was one of two things. So it first involved you getting whipped, right? Yeah, not fun. And then what would happen after you got whipped was one of two things. They would either put salt into the wounds, or they would put you into a barrel of salt water.
No!
Yeah, so anyone who's ever accidentally gotten salt or lemon juice into a cut before, you know that that's not very pleasant, although there was some science to back up that it was kind of good to heal up the wounds, but it still wasn't very pleasant on the being whipped side of things. But most of our perceptions of pirates and piracy come mainly from one source, which is, of course, Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island.
That's fair.
And so, Treasure Island was originally, like a lot of novels written at this time, over time published chapter by chapter in a boys' magazine. It's a book that was intended for children, but like a lot of books that were intended for children, adults kind of latched onto it, picked up on it, and found a lot of enjoyable things as well. And the story behind Treasure Island is actually kind of a fun one, which was Stevenson and his family were on vacation, I believe, up in Scotland, and it was a particularly rainy day, which if you've ever been to Scotland, you'll know is a lot of them. Scotland's a lovely country, but the rain does like to fall down there. Or up there, I guess, because we're in Cleveland. And so he's sitting there with his children, and he kind of started drawing a map with his children, and then as he kept drawing, he's noticed different things, and he started labeling them, and then he imagined a big, line being drawn with a big X, pirate treasures, and all of these wonderful things, and so he loved it enough that he started writing a book. And one of the interesting things about the book is, as you read it, it's actually from two completely different point of view chapters. The first third and the last third of the book are the point of view of Jim Hawkins, who is the protagonist, and if you've ever seen a film adaptation, he's the protagonist of the whole thing. And the middle section is from the point of view of a character who's sometimes written out of the story, which is his family friend who's a doctor who talks about kind of fighting the pirates once they get to the island. Because Stevenson stopped, he wasn't quite sure how to keep telling the story. And so here's kind of a shame, a thing that I think's a shame of Robert Louis Stevenson is he's written two of the best twists in literature history that have no longer been considered twists because they've been done to such a degree that no one ever really wrote them with twists to begin with, and if they did, like nowadays, we all know them anyway. So the first twist is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He wrote Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This is going to pay off, I promise.
I'm enthralled. I love Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, so if you ever read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, first off, it's a novella, which means it's a little bit shorter, and it's all told from the point of view of Dr. Jekyll's very close friend, who is being summoned by Dr. Jekyll because there's some weird stuff going down in London. And so it's all told from the point of view of this character, and basically you meet Dr. Jekyll, you learn that he's this wonderful man, and then things start going wrong, and I think there's like a little confrontation with Mr. Hyde. But basically the last chapter of this novella is he goes into the laboratory and he finds Dr. Jekyll's novel, and as he's reading it, he learns about the experiment. He learns that Dr. Jekyll and this horrible Mr. Hyde who's been murdering people have actually been the same person the whole time. So,
the twist.
Presented, it's a really good twist.
Yeah.
Because Dr. Jekyll's presented as this paragon of virtue, and Mr. Hyde is the most evil thing in the entire world. Now, if you're watching an adaptation of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, if that transformation sequence doesn't happen within the first, 30 to 40 minutes of the movie, people are going to get upset. Because that's what you know about it, right? He does the experiment, he turns from Jekyll to Hyde, back and forth. And then the other big twist is that Long John Silver's a pirate.
Oh.
Yeah. So the entire first section of the book, Benbow, which is the inn that he and his family live in, is kind of attacked by a rogue. A pirate shows up, basically tells Jim to ignore or to beware the one-legged man, and then he dies. Pirates come and attack, and then Jim goes off on this adventure with his family friend, whose name is, I believe, Dr. Livesey. I don't know that one off the top of my head. And he goes to this little inn, and he's sitting there, and the inn is owned by the cook, who has been hired, who owns his own inn, but he's closing down the shop for a couple of months because he knows it's the sea. The guy's name is Silver, and he has a peg leg, but he's very friendly, he's very cordial, he's very nice to Jim, And so Jim's like, this guy has a peg leg, that's kind of weird. He then notices out of the corner of his eye that one of the people at this bar that Long John Silver owns and operates is one of the guys who attacks him. He mentions it to Silver, and Silver runs him out because he says that he will not consort with anyone who is involved in the most evil ills of, pirates and piracy. So he's established himself as a trustworthy guy. He kind of takes on a sort of surrogate father role for Jim. This is true for any adaptation you'll ever see of it. Takes on this surrogate father role. And then the big twist happens when Jim is kind of like sneaking around and he hears conspiring against him. So, arguably two of the best twists in my personal favorite. I love both of those twists, the way they're presented. You know that Long John Silver is a pirate within the first 10 minutes of really any adaptation that happens.
That's fair.
But yeah, so Robert Louis Stevenson was responsible for, he had people walk the plank. He had the big red X on the map. He had, the parrot who said, pieces of 8 and all that stuff. Peg legs were a thing. It was kind of a fact of life, and actually Long John Silver is kind of always depicted going around on crutches too, which is nice because I was a kid who never really passed my sniff test of a person kind of wandering around with a peg leg and having it operate as functional as a normal leg. Like, I always thought you might need a little something under the arm to give you a little bit of support.
You can't really control that very well.
Yeah, exactly. And so a lot of our perceptions of pirates started off with that book right there, and everything kind of evolved from that point. Pirates were huge in the cinema of the 1920s and 30s. A couple of big name movies both star Errol Flynn, who is, of course, famous for portraying Robin Hood. And so they were your big, fun, swashbuckling adventures. Errol Flynn is the guy who was responsible for the now kind of infamous trope of he's falling off of the mast and he pulls out his dagger and he stabs it into the mast so he can.
That's always so dope when you see it
go down. Yeah. So he was the guy who kind of pioneered that one. Lots of swinging from riggings and having swords clash midair. Those big, fun 1920s adventure serials that we all love so much to kind of poke fun at. But I think everyone's lying to themselves. I think everyone really enjoys when a guy hits a chandelier cord and the chandelier crashes into a bunch of men. It's fantastic. And then most recently, we've had Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, which I never thought I would call a franchise when I first saw it, but the first movie is amazing. I actually have a soft spot in my heart for the ones I've seen. I have actually seen the first 4. I acknowledge that 2, 3, and 4 aren't good movies, but I love them.
I saw 1, 2, and 3. I thought it was alright.
They're cheesy.
3rd was a good stop.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They're cheesy and they're fun, and like a lot of things, it gets some stuff right, and it gets other stuff dreadfully wrong. And I think the biggest one, and one that I don't know if any movie will ever quite get right, is just how little power the captain has, which is something we'll get into in the Pirate Society. Does that not pass your sniff test?
Yeah, I know there was always like this, mutiny was always like a thing that I remember. Yeah. But like I always remember in like the cartoons and like the movies, like as soon as the captain steps on deck, everyone was like, oh shit, that guy's gonna kill us if we do anything wrong. So yeah, it is kind of interesting that a bunch of outlaws and bandits were basically lesser than one guy on the ship. Yeah. And they could easily just take that dude out.
Well, that's something we'll talk about in a little bit, I promise.
Okay.
It's one of my favorite little quirks of pirates and piracy. And the other thing that they present, which is a real thing, but it's not quite the way they present it, and I don't think they were ever intending to make a historically accurate movie, so keep that in mind as I'm saying this. They present the pirate code, which was a real thing.
Okay.
But it was individual for every ship. It wasn't like a universal code of laws that every pirate
get it hardbound?
understood. Yeah.
I'm just imagining that pirates on like the docks handing out the Bibles of pirates.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, here's your pirate Bible, and here's your pirate Bible.
Do you know the Gospel of the Pieces of 8?
Yes, things like, yeah, exactly. And good riddance to those who, turn against it. But anyway, so when we think of pirates, of course, we think of big and flashy and flamboyant and fun, because there's a certain level of romance to them. They're people who turned their back on society at large and chose to live by a different set of standards. And one of the things that I think, is pretty accurate throughout is most pirates enjoyed their booze.
Well, yeah, who doesn't enjoy booze?
That's fair, yeah, but like rum and grog specifically, if you ever play the Monkey Island games, the grog in that one is very fun because
I want to go through those games again.
Oh, I played through the first one. It was amazing. It was quite a lot of fun. I'm actually working through the second one, although I haven't played it in quite a while. We might have to do a video game episode on that one. Oops. Yeah. Whoops, tangent. But yeah, so clearly we all have our own fun little perceptions of what pirates are and what pirates have been. But I'd like to transition into a little bit of the history of piracy.
Ooh.
So, we have pirates dating back as early as ancient Greece, maybe even a little bit earlier, because basically you only really need 3 things for piracy to exist. First thing, you need to have big kind of expanses of not super well maintained trade routes. The reason that pirates often worked on oceans was because it was very hard for a navy, even a very large navy, to protect all of the ocean. The ocean is very, very large. You're not going to be able to protect every single ship that goes through back and forth.
That makes sense.
The second thing you need is smaller and faster ships. So a lot of times pirate ships tended to be, they were still big ships, mind, but they were a little bit easier to maneuver, they were a little bit faster to maneuver, and they were really well maintained by their crews. And then the third thing is just kind of greater knowledge of an area. So pirates were incredibly familiar with what is now referred to as the Lesser Antilles, which if you ever look at the map of the Caribbean, there are these little islands that kind of form kind of like a scattershot connection or band of islands on the outside rim that weren't great for colonization because they were small. They didn't have a lot of great farming land, and it was very hard to distribute. They tended to be full of like crags and little bays and things like that. Pirates learned those things inside and out. You didn't want to bring big ships into the great Lesser Antilles because they would crash and they would sink a lot faster. But if you had a smaller ship, you could kind of go into an island that not many people were aware of, how they worked or how they existed, and you could hide out there until the heat blew over, and then you could go about your business.
Okay.
So those were 3 pretty important things. Ancient Greece had very similar things, although their piracy worked a little bit differently. But where I like to put my area of attention and focus is on what we all like to think of when we think of piracy, which is the Caribbean. Now, I acknowledge that there's a lot of piracy out there. There was piracy in the East. There was piracy in the Mediterranean Sea. You had the Barbary pirates, which Thomas Jefferson fought against. But I like to focus on the Caribbean pirates because that's the ones that a lot of people are the most familiar with. And so the question kind of becomes, why would a person become a pirate? Because if you were caught as a pirate, chances were that no matter what offense it was, your best bet was you were going to be killed and you were going to be displayed, and chances are you're going to have birds peck away at your dying, rotting corpse for the next few months.
That's probably not the reason I would be a pirate.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing, right? Is you had a short life. There was no guarantee that you were going to have a long, prosperous life as a pirate. But there is a famous quote from my personal favorite pirate, who I'm planning on doing a full episode of, named Black Bart Roberts, which I'm going to paraphrase because I cannot remember all of it, but I can find the actual quote and give it to you, and we can put it up in like some secondary information or things like that. So, in a proper life, there is low food, hard work, and heavy punishment. But in this life, plenty, satiety, and the only fear we have is a look or two at choking. No, a merry life and a short one shall be my motto.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah, they knew some things. There was no guarantee you were going to have a long life in any point in the Caribbean. If you were a sailor working on a ship, your life was going to be probably very short, and in a lot of cases, it probably wasn't going to be very pleasant. If you were a person working for a naval ship or for a merchant ship, you could expect bad food, low food, punishments for very small offenses. One particularly egregious example that someone points out is that there was a cabin boy who was once flogged 12 times and pickled for stealing a biscuit from the captain's quarters.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oof.
And so, one other thing is that the people who were in charge of merchant ships were people living in England. And so, the captain was as much under pressure as anyone else on that ship to make sure that their journey was quick and profitable. So that meant that there was a really good chance that they were probably going to overwork you to the point of starvation and high punishments, things like that, which created a lot of unhappy people and sailors.
Ugh.
Compound on this the not particularly great idea that Britain had of putting political prisoners and revolutionaries on naval ships and sometimes merchant ships.
Oops.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like a good concoction for success.
So, yeah. A lot of times, pirate ships were the result of mutinies. Almost exclusively in a lot of cases. They would mutiny, they would kill, the captain and anyone else who were made loyal to the captain, and then they decided that they were probably going to become pirates. That's one route. The other route is that you can be something called a privateer, and this is where the idea of pirates kind of gets nebulous because one man's pirate might be another man's privateer. So, quick little aside, let's say that the nation of Joe and Cody go to war.
Oh no.
Sorry, you said some things. There were some bad things. No, I'm just kidding, everyone.
Wow, rude.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And so basically, I turn to my top captain and I look at him and I say, hey, you can attack any ship in Cody's navy. You can steal as much stuff as you want, and I get a percentage of it.
That's pretty dope.
Yeah. Oh, but here's the thing, Cody. You also look to your top guys and you say, hey, you're allowed to attack any ship in Joe's navy, and you can take as much stuff as you want, and I get a cut of it. Okay.
Yeah, that's what
right?
I would do.
So, oh no, Cody's naval ship attacked my naval ship. What a pirate. Uh-oh.
I see what it is.
Whoops. So, when you're looking at pirates stuff, it's really important to find out who you're looking at, because sometimes they could be a privateer. But a lot of times, privateers might become pirates, because in 5 years, we make peace. We're friends again.
Woo!
Welcome back. And then I look to my top guys, and I say, hey, you're not allowed to attack Cody's ship anymore without any punishment. You have to become a regular naval ship again. And that privateer says, no. Turns their back on me and my government and just starts sailing around and starts attacking willy-nilly. There was a famous pirate who did that, whose name was... I'm blanking on it. I'll figure it out.
I can't help you with this.
I know, I'm sorry. Not a fairly well-known pirate, but yeah. So that happened a few times as well. But in many cases, pirates became pirates because they just wanted a better life. As a pirate, you were guaranteed more money, because any money you earned basically went back to you a lot of times. Everyone got an even share and an equal share of the profits, which meant that when you got into port, that meant you could have better food. That meant that you could have more rum.
Yeah.
That meant you could have more women.
Oh, that's cool too.
Let's just put it, you could have more sexual gratification. Maybe better clothing, things like that. And other things about Pirate Society that were great as well was there was really no guarantee that you had to work. Obviously, everyone pulled their fair share.
Sure.
But if you wanted to take a day off, by all means, take a day off. It was pretty great for these people who had lived lives of punishment and suffering and things like that. And, hey, you might die tomorrow from heat exhaustion or something like that. Would you rather die under the command of a cold, uncaring company that basically just wants to get the top dollar, or would you rather die living as good a life as you possibly could have?
Well, it seems pretty obvious.
It seems pretty obvious.
Hey!
And a lot of people chose it.
They didn't choose A, they chose B.
Well, there were some people who still towed the line.
Yeah.
I like to say that I live vicariously through pirates.
Sure.
Because I'm a very much a good law-abiding individual, and so I like to just kind of read about like the mind of a person who would turn their back, because I guarantee if I was living back then, I probably wouldn't have been a pirate. No. I probably wouldn't have even left England, if I'm being completely honest with you and our listeners. But yeah, so this was pretty important for people to make this choice. And so one of the other ways you would become a pirate, so you had your mutinies, yes. You had your privateers who decided that they didn't want to be privateers anymore, and then the third one and the most other main one was you would be, captured into piracy, basically. So let's say that you were just a ship hand. Your ship gets overrun by pirates, and so the first thing that would happen would be that, they would board. In a lot of cases, as soon as people saw the black flag, which had a variety of skull and crossbones on them, sometimes it was just as simple as a simple black piece of cloth that was enough to show that you were a pirate. A lot of ships would surrender, and so what would happen is there would be a boarding party, which tended to consist of the quartermaster of the ship and a number of crew members. Not too incredibly many.
I'm just thinking of two boats parked next to each other, just having a good time, like having a party, like a boat party.
Kind of. And so basically what would happen is you would gather everyone up. You would send one or two people below deck to start pulling up goods that you were carrying with you. And then you would kind of go down the row and you would ask people. And of course, this varies from pirate to pirate, of course. Everything I'm saying is no necessarily universals for pirates and things like that. They would go down the line and they would ask, was your captain a good man? Did he punish you without due reason? Did he work you too hard? Did he not give you enough food to save money and things like that? And there was actually some examples. Let's say they were going down the line and people were saying, oh yeah, our captain was a good man. He was fine, things like that. What would happen is the pirates would strip the ship, and they would, maybe leave the captain and people loyal to him to sail off. Perfectly fine.
Okay.
They would offer you the invitation. If anyone would like to become a pirate, we can offer you better food, more pay, this, that, the other thing. But if you wanted to remain loyal to your captain because you were a good man, you could stay there, and you could sail off unmolested. But let's say your captain was a right dick.
Ooh.
Chances are only one thing would happen to that guy, and it would be shot in the head.
Ugh.
Or, abandoned, shipwrecked, or whatever.
Sure.
Those loyal to him would probably also be killed as well. So, let's say you weren't super keen on being a pirate, but you were super keen on being alive. A lot of times those people would become pirates as well. And one of the nice things is, after you would have a new crew, basically you would have a big party where everyone got real drunk. Yeah! Pirates really like their alcohol. I cannot stress this enough.
Hey guys, I'm going to get off on a little tangent here. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to get in on this conversation, feel free to tweet us at fandomr_podcast, or you can email us at fanroulettepodcast@gmail.com. If you want information about future events, such as when we're going to be on iTunes, when we're going to get the YouTube up and running, you can follow us at fandomroulette.com. Now we'll go back to the show.
One of the things we're going to talk about in the Pirate Society is something that I think is possibly one of the funniest things I've ever read about in history, as a whole. I'm very excited about it. So yeah, those are sort of the main ways that people would become pirates, either through mutiny or things like that. And now, I'm going to open up the floor to some questions. Do you have any questions for me before we kind of transition into Pirate Society?
Well, my pirate... besides what I've learned today...
Sure, yeah.
My pirate knowledge is limited to shows...
Yes.
...and Assassin's Creed Black Flag.
Cool. I've not actually played that one.
It's basically a pirate Assassin's Creed.
See, I really would like to play it, but I don't have any means to play it.
We'll talk later.
Yeah.
We'll find a way.
Nice. Life finds a way.
Sea shanties.
Yes.
Plentiful, like in Assassin's Creed 3, or...
Yeah. Sea shanties were, simply put, work songs. They exist in basically any sort of uniform work group. So, have you ever seen the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Yeah.
So that first scene with the chain gang, and everything has the rhythm, it's...
Yeah.
Da 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 da. that beat was when you were supposed to do the swing. And if you listen to a lot of sea shanties, it's a very simple pattern. A lot of them tend to be like 1-2s. So if you would think about it, it's da 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 da. That song's called Holloway for Rosie. It's a really fun little song. Try not to find it with the original lyrics because it gets very racist. No. But basically, those beats were designed to be sort of like pulling on ropes. Pull, overhand, underhand, overhand, underhand. It was designed to keep your crew working. If you were pushing like the wheel to pull up the anchor, it was designed for that. Basically, anytime you had a musician on the ship, the musician was actually an incredibly crucial part of any ship because it allowed for songs to keep the crew working and motivated. These songs tended to have very simple rhythms and melodies. They were designed for if people wanted to jump in and kind of write their own lines or lyrics, they could do that. Sometimes they would have the names of what the task at hand was for. So you have Holloway Rosie and Holloway Joe. Holloway Rosie's a little bit faster, Holloway Joe's a little bit slower, but those were songs designed for pulling ropes. You had other songs that were designed for, mopping or things like that. Basically, I'm sure that a lot of people in our audience can relate to this. If you have something to distract your mind from the work you're doing, it makes life a lot easier and a lot more fun to live. So, basically, like the shanties worked both as sort of like a pace for the work you should be doing and kind of as a distraction for the work you should be doing. So, there you go.
Okay, so this is a question because how do I describe this? It comes from like the TV shows and of course the games and things like that.
Sure.
How often were there like cannonball fights between ships and like those naval battles you see where they line up rows of cannons and just unload on each other?
Yeah. So it depends on the historian you're reading. There was a really interesting book that I read called The Invisible Hook, which is a fun little play on the invisible hand, by Peter Leeson, who was an economic historian, whose one of his core arguments was that one of the reasons that you had the skull and crossbones was to try to fire as few bullets as possible, because cannonballs and bullets and powder were all very expensive things, and for the pirates, they were all trying to become profitable. So if you could take a ship without firing a single shot, that would have been the most beneficial. Chances are pirate ships tended to have a few cannons, I think on a lot of cases like 2 to 6, maybe more depending on how prosperous or how well off you were doing.
Sure.
One of the things about cannons that's incredibly tricky is the fact that there's a lot of factors in cannon fire, right? So cannons are already kind of hard to do on even ground, or on the ground in general, because we have super scientific tools in a lot of cases. That was a good word. That was a good description I did right there. In a lot of cases, there's like examples of cannonballs, at least for like ground combat, were designed to kind of like skip and hop. So in case you didn't necessarily hit the person, it would kind of not necessarily bounce, but
it had some collateral.
Yeah, so you weren't necessarily going for accuracy, you're just kind of going for a general vicinity, and you would probably, hopefully, get some people in the way. So now, factor into that, you're on the ocean, that's moving up and down, moving side to side, and your enemy is moving about as quickly and rapidly as you are. So broadsiding and doing cannon fire was possible, but it was also kind of be difficult. And the main thing you would do when you were trying to fight ship-to-ship combat was you were trying to aim for masts, because a ship without a mast or a sail is basically a ship, a bird without wings. It's not going to do much. A lot of times ships could have been equipped with big oars in case you were caught in a serious doldrum. They weren't used all that frequently though, And like I said, a ship without sails was basically dead in the water. So if you were ever pulling out the cannons, you were aiming for mastheads. Okay. Basically.
You kind of makes me sad that in practice you probably didn't shoot a lot of cannonballs.
Yeah, it's one of those deals where, like, if you read the stuff, they'll talk about, I mean, almost all pirate stories end with a big, glorious cannonballs and muskets blazing battles, and it almost always ends with them losing as well. Yeah, it's an unfortunate thing, but
I mean, they have to end sometime.
They have to end, yeah, in A Merry Life and a Short One. That was kind of their deal. They knew that there was a timeline on it. Actually, a very famous and prominent pirate historian named Marcus Rediker postulated and threw out... He
sounds like a pirate.
I know, right? It's a really good name. One of the things he throws out there is, and who knows, this could all be, one of the things about history is it's taking evidence that you find and kind of formulating an idea around it, is like the Skull and Crossbones was paying homage to quote-unquote King Death, who was a prominent figure in a lot of cemeteries. And so, like, even having a skull and crossbones on your flag was kind of an acknowledgement that your life wasn't going to be very long. So it's kind of like worshiping that thing that was always looming behind you and that thing that a lot of people feared, which was death.
Okay.
Once again, who knows? That could not be accurate, but it was compelling, and he put out a lot of interesting stuff about, like, skulls and cemeteries.
Cool.
So yeah, I mean, trying to, do as little damage as possible, because that meant you were not burning as much gunpowder, which was expensive. So, any other questions at the moment?
I got a final one.
Okay, cool.
It's around the same concept, so I'm kind of expecting a similar answer.
Sure.
But it stems from playing Black Flag. One of the things you could do was upgrade how many flintlock pistols you could have on your body at any one point. So you could, like, jump onto a ship and just be like, pull out a pistol, bang. You pull out the second one, bang. How common was it to have more than maybe one flintlock pistol, or was it actually super common?
I think it depends from pirate to pirate. I know in a lot of stuff I've read, you always get good descriptions of the captains, and it sounds like in most cases, most captains would have 2 to 4 flintlocks.
See, that sounds dope. Jump onto a pirate ship, bang, 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 bang.
Yeah, although...
Granted, you only had one shot.
Yeah, they were hard to reload and things like that. So yeah, I think in a lot of cases, like, they would have 2 to 4 on their person at any given time. That's most of the stuff I've read about. I think Black Bart Roberts had 4 on him at any given time. I think Calico Jack had 3 or 4 on him at any given time. Okay. Things like that. So that one was a little more common. Chances are, if you were like a common sailor, you might have 1 flintlock and then like a dagger or a sword or things like that. Okay, and now we're going to transition into my last little section, which is about pirate society. Some of the fun stuff about that. All right, so right off the bat, I would like to talk about pirate codes.
Yes.
Because, like I said, it was kind of situational for every individual ship. But pirate codes were laws that every pirate on their ship would abide by. The most insulting thing you could call a pirate was an anarchist. Because they had laws, they just didn't follow your laws. And so, pirate codes they're fascinating documents that get into, like, a lot of the minutia of day-to-day life. They break down the payments. So if you were a pirate, you were guaranteed an equal share of the profit that you brought in. So at the end, everyone would get an even share of the money that you got, with 2 exceptions. The quartermaster got 1 extra share, and the captain got 2 extra shares. But this was something that was agreed upon before you left. So it wasn't like you got to the shore and you didn't have, you didn't get the money that was owed to you. Other things involved the musicians got Sundays off.
Nice.
And so, as we just talked about, musicians were kind of there for work. And so, if the musicians had Sundays off, chances are everyone had Sundays off.
Or at least bless them.
Or at least a lot of people. Actually, there was one pirate captain who would sometimes hold mass services.
Aww.
So that's fun, right?
What a sweetheart.
I know, right? Looking out for their immortal damn souls. Let's see, what else? Pirates had workmen's compensation.
Wow.
So if you lost a limb or got gravely injured during a battle, then you could be given a little bit of an extra share for that. And then one last fun thing is they would talk about how to settle disputes on the ship. So in a lot of cases, you were not able to fight another person on ship. Basically, if you had a grievance against another person, you had to wait until the next time you made landfall. And so in a lot of cases, this was designed to just kind of let grievances blow over.
That makes sense.
And a lot of times, by the time you reached the island, all the parties had forgotten what the initial thing was. And then, even if you were able to fight, or you chose to fight, in a lot of cases, it was, your traditional duel rules, where I think both people got either a flintlock or like a dagger. And in a lot of cases, it was just the first person to draw blood was the winner. They weren't even necessarily encouraging you to kill your fellow crewmates.
Oh, well, that's good. At least they didn't want to kill each other.
Yes, that's true. And then one last thing, this is one I almost forgot about. They would kind of have trials almost. So, like, if, with one exception, if you were accused of breaking a ship's law, everyone else would get to vote on whether or not they felt you were due punishment, and then how extreme that punishment should be.
Huh.
Yeah, right? So
it's funny because I always felt like in cartoons and the movies and things that ships were all very, like, chaotic and not structured.
I mean, there was chaos, but...
Right, but, like, they never really got into, like, oh, we have to... Except for maybe I think one of the Pirates movies had, like, a court session, but that was between different pirates, if I'm not mistaken.
That was between different pirates.
So, like, you never saw, like, Barbossa having trial for some asshole who broke one of the laws.
Yeah, right? Well,
which is interesting because if you didn't have those moments where you saw through the chaos and realized that they have this order, you would just kind of assume, at least that's what I thought up until just now, that they're really, I mean, maybe there were a few laws here and there, but I didn't realize it was so structured.
Yeah. Now, that one law that I said that was basically like kill on sight was if you were ever caught not giving like money or some of the spoils to the quartermaster, then you would be killed on sight.
Wow. Well, I mean...
Basically, all of the money was stockpiled in one area.
Yeah, and then probably divvied out at
some point. And then divvied out when you got back to shore.
Makes sense.
So because of that, the quartermaster was arguably the most important person in your ship's day-to-day life.
Yeah, he was your payroll.
He was your payroll. In a lot of cases, he was in charge of like food and things like that as well. Okay. Obviously, you were able to eat more than you would on your regular merchant ship, but, you still had to have some structure, usually towards the end of a voyage or things like that. And so, as I mentioned earlier too, captains didn't have as much power as we like to think that they have, because if your ship started because of a mutiny, everyone looked around and they realized that no one was more or less qualified to rule than anyone else. So they would actually, in a lot of cases, elect their captains.
Okay.
And there was always kind of this sword dangling over your head, which was, if you do something that we don't like, if you do something that previous captain did, we can kill you for it.
Yeah, because, I mean, they killed the first captain. Who's to say they're not going to kill the...
Exactly. So, a little bit of a preview for the Black Bart Roberts episode that we'll probably eventually do. When he was first taken on, he was elected captain almost 2 or 3 weeks after he was a member of the ship. And then he was elected captain basically with the understanding that he was either going to do a very good job and we were all going to be very good, prosperous captains, or he was going to do a very shitty job and we would kill him and then the next guy would know what not to do. So it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. It just so happens that he was very good at his job.
Nice.
And then there was one exception to this rule, which was anytime you engaged in battle, the captain had complete authority. So if you were fighting another ship, if the captain told you to jump, you would say how high. But outside of that, you really weren't. The captain didn't have much authority. To the point where, one of my favorite little stories, there was some pirate captain who really enjoyed having tea. And he was given a little tea set, except that anytime he would go to his tea set, almost always something was going to be missing. So they would take away his sugar bowl or his cream pot or maybe like a spoon or something, as kind of a reminder of saying, yeah, you're the captain, but we can take whatever we want at any point. You're not better than us. So they would just kind of steal pieces of his tea set.
Nice.
And then one last fun little thing that we'll talk about, and then once again I'll kind of open it up to any questions, was these sort of quote-unquote governmental meetings. So you would have, meetings with the crew and things like that when you would vote on laws or whether or not you should attack a ship or things like that. You had to be drunk at these meetings. There would be big bowls of punch.
Yeah!
And you had to drink plentifully and drink often. And in fact, there are some accounts of people being executed for being too sober at these ship meetings.
Damn!
Because if you weren't drinking, then that meant you were trying to remember what was happening at those movies, what meant you were probably a traitor.
Oh, shit. I get it.
Basically, the concept was you would be so drunk that you probably wouldn't remember what was happening, and things like that, which sounds like a grand time for everyone.
And I feel like sometimes, at least I know when I drink,
yes,
you kind of let down some of those like social guards that you have.
Yeah, for sure.
And you're a little more open. So I guess maybe there was a psychological advantage for maybe not necessarily being flat out wasted, but
that's possible. And then that funny story I told you about earlier, there was one ship that got such a large quantity of alcohol that they weren't quite sure what to do with it. So at one point they started swabbing the deck with it.
Oh.
Because they had too much alcohol, they didn't know what to do with it.
Too much booze.
I know, right?
That sounds like a personal problem.
They had quite a lot of barrels of it.
They needed more is the problem.
Sure, yeah. So anyway, do you have any questions for me about the pirate society or anything we talked about in this last little section, or once again, pirates in general? Anything that you want to think of?
Mildly off topic, but still on the theme of pirates.
Heck yeah. I love off topic. That's where I thrive.
Will you run a pirate themed art role playing game with me at some point, being the game master?
Oh heck yeah! That would be.
I want all of this.
That would be so much fun.
I can't leave my life and get on a boat and just drink and rob people. I feel like
that'd
I can't
be fun.
do that in real life.
Do you have like a system in mind?
Nope.
No.
We'll figure it out.
We could do Thieves in the Dark. That might be fun.
Ooh.
Yeah. All right, but once again, going off topic, in our current campaign, we have run across pirates, and you had some ship combat, and I sat there and I spent about, I think, 10 minutes accurately drawing out what a kind of medium-sized frigate would be with, I think we had 4 cannons on it, and 3 masts, and the central cargo hold, which I think all ended up being used at one point or another, and it was really fun because it was kind of like the first time I got to use my pirate knowledge outside of an academic or just having a casual conversation. It was a lot of fun. So yeah, and I mean, obviously we went to the fun Errol Flynn side of things and not the hard core pirate stuff, because I'm not going to be pedantic at Dungeons and Dragons because I was playing a halfling.
You were a halfling pirate.
I'm a halfling pirate bard, so an important member of any ship's crew.
Right,
as you just found out.
Right. Gosh, I have another question.
Yeah.
What is the one thing that doesn't often get portrayed in pirate pop culture, whether it's movies or TV shows or video games, that you would love for them to dive into?
That's a really good question.
I know, sometimes I think of good ones.
Yeah. I think that there are one or two things that I'd like to sort of see an actual relation of captain and crew, where the captain doesn't have too incredibly much power, just because I think that there are some interesting aspects and dynamics where anytime you see it, I think there's always a scene in Treasure Island or any of its iterations where the crew is trying to mutiny and Long John Silver is able to very easily get them back on his side because he's smarter than them. But I would love for there to be mutinies just be based on the fact that you did stuff that we didn't agree with. I feel in a lot of cases the sort of democratic spirit of pirates is lost on mass media, which is fine because you're trying to tell a compelling story first and foremost. But yeah, I feel like that's often lost. And then I think the other big thing is I don't know if we've ever actually truly seen, like, a pirate crew forming out of a mutiny. But
okay. That would be really dope to see.
Yeah.
What would be even better, I think, if we didn't know it was going to be a pirate show.
Yeah.
Or a pirate movie. Maybe you go into it and it's just like the name of the boat.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you find out that like halfway through the movie it becomes a pirate movie. That would be dope.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like, have you ever seen Master and Commander, Far Side of the World?
I don't think so.
It's a really good movie that is, I think, roughly about the same time period, probably a little bit later, but it's kind of the other side of the coin where it's a naval ship. And it stars Russell Crowe and I think Paul Bettany.
Okay.
Plays like a Charles Darwin's-ish type. And it's just really interesting because you can see a lot of the brutality of just life on a ship, except that everyone on the crew actually works really well together. So, like, there's every now and then, like, little hints of a mutiny, but, like, Russell Crowe's able to kind of keep order.
Right.
And things like that. And I think that's a really useful movie to watch in tandem with pirate movies, because now that I'm thinking about it, like, I think the last time that there's ever been, like, a straight, no, like, just, like, a straight pirate movie without any, like, supernatural elements might be the Black Swan, which was in, like, the 30s. I'm probably going to be wrong, and someone's probably going to point out, have you watched X or Y? I know I've heard really good things about Black Sails. I watched the first episode of Black Sails. I enjoyed it quite a lot, but it was on Starz, and I don't have Starz. And one of the things was I was very excited that I was going to be able to enjoy it, because in the first, like, 10 minutes of the first episode, you find out that it's kind of like a Treasure Island prequel. So it's like, they're trying really hard to portray a really good, honest pirate ship, but anytime they did something wrong, I'm like, okay, it's cool, it's in the Treasure Island universe. You know? So it kind of, because I'm a person who's very forgiving about my media and about, like, historical inaccuracies in my media. I know that there's some people out there who can get really upset about it, but I'm always very forgiving of things. Like, I know first and foremost they're trying to tell a compelling story. I always think of, like, you know, historical media as like a springboard, where if you watch something and you really enjoy it, then you should go out and try to learn more about it on your own. Like, if you came up to me and you said, I saw Braveheart and I know everything about William Wallace and the Scottish Rebellion, I would say no. But if you came up to me and you said, I saw Braveheart and I got really interested and I, like, took out a book on Scottish history and it was kind of weird and dense, and I don't know if I got all of it, but I got some of it, I would say, like, okay, let's have a conversation, because that's what I think historic media can do, is it's kind of proves that jumping off point and that springboard.
Yeah.
So I'm not looking for a perfect movie or a perfect pirate show, but if it's accurate enough to the point that someone's like, huh, that's interesting, I'd like to learn more about that. That's kind of what happened to me. I saw the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie when I was like 11, when it first came out. Absolutely fell in love with pirates again, because I had gone through that short little phase of, it came out in 2001, right? I was 11 when that came out. Yikes.
You know, I don't remember. I don't
think
remember how old.
I think it came out 2001. So you were probably like, yeah, dead air.
Math is one of my
strengths. But yeah, and so the first Pirates movie comes out, absolutely fall in love with pirates again, because I was kind of going through that, like, angsty, like, I don't like anything I liked when I was a dumb little kid stage. And then I saw that movie, absolutely fell in love with it, and that was back when the History Channel, like, ran, like, really good programs.
Oh, you mean you don't like what's on there now?
No, not really. That could be an episode at some point, I think. And they did a really cool special called Real Pirates of the Caribbean. And that was the first time I had seen a lot of the ideas of, like, the democracy aspects and, you know, things that I had never really thought of for pirates that were really cool and really kind of accurate. Or, I mean, it was really cool, and it really had made me think about this group of people that you had never really thought of like that before, because you think of them as, you know, the swashbuckling hero types, but in a lot of cases it was people who were just kind of down on their luck, looking for a better life and a better tomorrow and things like that. So it was sort of the first time I thought of something as more academic than fun, but that you could still kind of have that core of fun in there, because pirates at their core are still really interesting and really fun to read about and learn about.
Yeah.
And for anyone at home who would like to learn a little bit more, a couple of books that I would recommend that are good, easy dives into pirates. Marcus Rediker's Villain of All Nations is available at a lot of libraries, I know. It's a very fun and quick read. I have some issues with Rediker's work, which is he kind of sometimes hand waves the whole like violence aspect of pirates, which I'm sure I did in this episode as well. Pirates were violent individuals. They did bad things. They were criminals. They might have had some more high ideals associated with them, and his sort of handwave of it as well as everyone was kind of violent at this time. It's something that sometimes I know people are critical of. A little bit more dense but still equally fun is Peter Leeson's The Invisible Hook, if you want to look at pirates from a more economic perspective. And then there are fun like biographies about pirates out there that are varying levels of like pop history versus like academic history, and I'm cool with all of it. I always tend to look for the more academic stuff, but that's because I would ideally like to do something with pirates in a more academic sense at some point. So yeah, any further questions for me?
You know, I got a lot to think about with all this pirate stuff.
I know, right? It's fun.
It's definitely not what I was expecting.
I know, right?
Which was great. I'm always happy when I'm surprised.
Yeah.
About something, because I always kind of thought they were a little chaotic. Or I mean, I know they are chaotic and they're violent, but I thought there was just no order, and it was just kind of like, let's just throw shit together and kind of see where it goes.
Yeah.
You know, and hearing all this, I think I like pirates more.
Yeah.
I think before I kind of always pictured them to be, you know, you're always your villain with no moral compass or anything like that. And sure, they're still violent. They still did a bunch of terrible things, I'm sure. But I don't know, they're a little more interesting now that I know that there's a little more going on than just what I thought from media.
I think one of the things that I think is super interesting about them is there is this tiny little like revolutionary nugget at the heart of them. Like one pirate referred to them as Robin Hoods of men. You know, they were kind of stealing from these cold, uncaring, you know, joint venture companies and governments, and kind of they were giving the money to themselves. Don't get me wrong, they weren't giving it back to the common people like actual Robin Hoods, but they were just people who were trying to live better lives, and part of that is admirable. They did it kind of off the grid and maybe did some despicable things in the process, but I think that there's, you know, a little core of admirableness there.
Yeah.
So.
And now I want some rum. Definitely want some rum.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Rum's always good. All right. Well, thank you for listening to this pirate episode of Phantom Roulette, the first, or I guess a one of our history series.
Yes.
As always, we would love to hear from you guys. So, our Twitter is fandomr_podcast, and feel free to email us at our email, which is fanroulettepodcast@gmail.com. Once again, we'd love for you guys to get involved in the conversation. I'd love to hear what you think about pirates, or something that you thought I might have missed, or something that you heard that might, you know, be different from what I've heard, because history is a cool thing that is kind of constantly ebbing and changing and flowing, and something that I might have read, you know, a few years ago might have changed over time, things like that. I think that's one of the cool benefits of history. So feel free to reach out to us. We love, you know, hearing from you, and we love having you join our conversations with us. So
absolutely.
But yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Joe.
I'm Cody.
And as always, stay nerdy.
Super nerdy.